Sarah Miller wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carried another heavy tray across the busy restaurant floor. The Golden Crown was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, and Friday nights were always crazy. Rich people in fancy clothes sat at tables that cost more for one meal than Sarah made in a whole week. She had been working here for 2 years now, ever since her father got sick. Before that, Sarah was a music student at the community college. She loved playing piano more than anything in the world. Her teachers said she had real talent, the kind that could take her places. But life had other plans. The night everything changed. Sarah came home from her piano lesson to find her father collapsed on the kitchen floor. The ambulance rushed him to the hospital, where doctors told her he had a serious heart condition. The surgery would cost thousands of dollars, and the medicine he needed every month was expensive too. Sarah's mother had died when she was 15, so it was just her and her dad. He had worked as a mechanic his whole life, fixing cars with his strong hands. Now those same hands shook when he tried to hold a coffee cup. The medical bills kept coming, each one bigger than the last. "I'm sorry, honey," her father had said from his hospital bed. "I know you wanted to finish school and become a real pianist. Maybe someday when I get better ... But Sarah knew the truth. There was no money for college anymore. Every dollar had to go toward keeping her father alive. She dropped out of school the next week and started looking for work. The Golden Crown hired her because she was polite and had a nice smile. The manager, Mr. Peterson, was a thin man with gray hair who always worried about keeping the customers happy. He told Sarah the rules on her first day. "These people have money, lots of it," he said, pointing to the dining room full of expensive tables. "They expect perfect service. Always smile, never argue, and remember that the customer is always right, even when they're wrong." Sarah learned quickly that serving rich people was different from serving regular folks. They expected her to be invisible unless they needed something. They talked about their big houses, expensive cars, and fancy vacations like she wasn't even there. Sometimes they were rude, sometimes they ignored her completely. But Sarah needed the job too much to complain. Her apartment was small and cheap, in a part of town where the paint peeled off the buildings and the elevator didn't always work. But it was close to the hospital where her father stayed, and she could afford the rent. Her most valuable possession was an old electronic keyboard she had bought at a garage sale. It wasn't much, but it let her keep music in her life. Every night after work, no matter how tired she was, Sarah would sit at that little keyboard and play. Her fingers remembered all the songs she had learned in school. She played classical pieces by Mozart and Chopin, jazz standards that made her feel happy, and sometimes her own songs that came from her heart. The keyboard didn't sound like a real piano, but when Sarah closed her eyes and played, she could imagine she was performing in a big concert hall. She dreamed of wearing a beautiful dress and playing for hundreds of people who came just to hear her music. But when she opened her eyes, she was back in her tiny apartment, getting ready for another day of carrying plates and pretending to smile. At the restaurant, Sarah worked hard to be the best waitress she could be. She memorized which customers liked their coffee black and which ones wanted extra cream. She learned the names of expensive wines and could explain every dish on the menu. The other servers liked her because she was always willing to help when they got busy. "You're too nice," her coworker Jenny told her one day. "These rich people don't care if you're nice. They just want their food fast and their wine glasses full." But Sarah couldn't help being nice. It was just who she was. Even when customers were rude to her, she stayed polite. Even when they left small tips on big bills, she said thank you. She needed every dollar she could get. The hardest part wasn't the rude customers or the long hours. The hardest part was the piano in the restaurant's private dining room. It was a beautiful black grand piano, the kind Sarah had dreamed of playing her whole life. Sometimes when she cleaned that room, she would look at the piano and feel her heart break a little bit. Once, when no one was around, Sarah had touched the keys without pressing them down. The piano was perfectly tuned, and she could tell it was worth more money than she would make in years of waitressing. She imagined how beautiful it would sound, how the music would fill the room and make everyone stop and listen. But customers weren't supposed to play the restaurant's piano. It was just for decoration, Mr. Peterson had told her. It makes the room look classy, he said. Rich people like that kind of thing. Sarah's father was getting a little better, but slowly. The doctor said he might never be strong enough to work again. That meant Sarah had to keep working at the restaurant, maybe forever. Sometimes late at night, when she was practicing on her little keyboard, she wondered if she would ever get to be a real musician. Her old music teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, sometimes called to check on her. "Don't give up on your music, Sarah," she would say. "You have something special. Promise me you won't stop playing." Sarah always promised, but it was getting harder to believe in her dreams. Every day was the same. Wake up early, put on her black and white uniform, smile at rich people who didn't see her as a real person, carry heavy trays until her back hurt, count her tips and hope there was enough for her father's medicine. The other servers talked about their plans for the future. Jenny wanted to save money and go back to school. Mike was trying to start his own business. But Sarah couldn't think past next week, next month, the next medical bill. Still, every night, she played her keyboard. Music was the one thing that was still hers, the one thing that reminded her of who she used to be and who she might still become. She didn't know that very soon. That little piano in the restaurant's private dining room would change her life forever. As Sarah got ready for another Friday night shift, she had no idea that this would be the night when everything changed. She put on her uniform, tied back her long brown hair, and walked to work, just like she had done hundreds of times before. But tonight would be different. Tonight, someone would try to embarrass her in front of a room full of rich people, and that piano she had been afraid to touch would finally reveal the secret she had been carrying in her heart. Marcus Wellington III walked into the Golden Crown restaurant like he owned the place. He was a tall man with expensive gray hair and a suit that cost more than most people made in 3 months. Behind him walked 6 of his business friends, all dressed in similar expensive clothes and talking loudly about their successful deals. "Good evening, Mr. Wellington," said Mr. Peterson, rushing over with a big fake smile. "Your usual table is ready in the private dining room." Marcus didn't even look at the manager. He was used to people treating him like a king wherever he went. At 45 years old, he owned 3 big companies and had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But money hadn't made him a better person. Instead, it had made him think he was better than everyone else. The private dining room was perfect for Marcus's party. 20 of his wealthy friends were celebrating his latest business success. He had just bought another company, which meant hundreds of regular workers would lose their jobs, but Marcus didn't care about that. All he cared about was the millions of dollars he would make. The room was fancy, with crystal glasses and gold plates. In the corner sat the beautiful black piano that Sarah had been looking at for 2 years. Marcus noticed it right away because he liked to show off his knowledge about expensive things. "Look at that piano," he told his friends, pointing with his wine glass. "That's a real Steinway grand piano. Probably worth more than most people's houses." His friends nodded and made impressed sounds, even though most of them didn't really care about pianos. They were used to Marcus showing off about expensive things. It was just what he did. Sarah was assigned to serve their table that night. She had worked private parties for Marcus before, and she always tried to stay as invisible as possible. He was the kind of customer who found reasons to complain, especially when he had been drinking expensive wine. As the night went on, Marcus drank more and became louder. He started telling stories about how smart he was and how he had tricked other business people into bad deals. His friends laughed at everything he said, even when his jokes weren't funny. That's what rich people did when someone was paying for their expensive dinner. You know what I love about being successful? Marcus said, holding up his wine glass. Everyone has to do what I say. Waiters, managers, employees, everyone. Money gives you power over people. Sarah was refilling water glasses when she heard this. She kept her face blank, but inside she felt sick. She had met people like Marcus before, people who thought having money made them important. They never thought about the real people who served them, people with their own problems and dreams. Marcus noticed Sarah cleaning up empty plates from their table. Something about her annoyed him. Maybe it was the way she stayed professional, even when his friends were being loud and rude. Maybe it was because she didn't try to flatter him like other servers did. Or maybe he was just drunk and looking for someone to bother. This girl has been serving us all night, Marcus announced to his friends. Look at her, working so hard for her little tips. I bet she has big dreams about getting out of this place. Sarah kept working, hoping he would get bored and leave her alone, but Marcus was just getting started. What's your name, sweetheart? He asked, using the fake sweet voice that rich people used when they wanted to show off. Sarah, sir, she answered politely, still hoping to avoid any trouble. Sarah, Marcus repeated, like he was tasting the name. That's a nice, simple name for a nice, simple girl. Tell me, Sarah, what do you do when you're not carrying plates around? Sarah felt trapped. She couldn't be rude to a customer, especially not one who spent as much money as Marcus did. But she also didn't want to share her personal life with him. I just work here, sir, she said, trying to finish clearing the table quickly. But Marcus wasn't done with her yet. He had been looking at the piano all evening, and now he had an idea that he thought was very funny. You know what, Sarah? He said, standing up and swaying a little from all the wine. I think this party needs some entertainment. Live music always makes a celebration better. His friends looked at each other, not sure where this was going. A few of them had seen Marcus do cruel things to service workers before, and they were starting to feel uncomfortable. We could call a real pianist, suggested Mrs. Chun, one of the older guests who didn't like Marcus's mean games. No, 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 Marcus said, waving his hand. That would take too long. Besides, I have a better idea. He pointed at Sarah with his wine glass. Our hard-working waitress here is going to play for us. Sarah's face went white. I'm sorry, sir, but I don't know how to play piano. Marcus laughed loudly. Of course you don't. That's what makes it fun. Come on, don't be shy. Just sit down and bang on the keys a little bit. Play us Happy Birthday or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, something easy. The room got very quiet. Sarah looked around desperately, hoping someone would help her, but most of Marcus's friends were looking down at their plates. They felt bad for her, but they weren't brave enough to tell Marcus to stop. I really can't play piano, sir, Sarah said again, her voice shaking a little. Marcus's smile got bigger and meaner. Sure you can. Look, I'll make it worth your time. He pulled out his expensive leather wallet and threw a $20 bill on the table. There's your tip for the show. All you have to do is sit at that piano and try to play something. Even if you're terrible, we'll all clap for you. Mr. Peterson appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Sarah looked at him with desperate eyes, hoping he would save her from this situation. But she could see from his worried face that he was more concerned about keeping Marcus happy than protecting her. Marcus owned part of the restaurant building, and he spent thousands of dollars there every month. If he got angry and stopped coming, or if he told other rich people not to eat there, the restaurant could lose a lot of money. Mr. Peterson couldn't afford to make Marcus mad. Maybe you could just try a simple song, Mr. Peterson suggested quietly to Sarah, just for a minute or two. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. She was trapped between losing her job and being humiliated in front of 20 rich people who saw her as nothing more than entertainment. The piano that she had dreamed about playing for 2 years was now going to be the place where Marcus embarrassed her. But Sarah didn't know that Marcus had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought he was about to humiliate a simple waitress who knew nothing about music. He had no idea that the young woman he was trying to embarrass had more musical talent in her little finger than all of his money could buy. The trap was set, but Marcus didn't realize he was the one who was about to be caught. Sarah stood frozen in the middle of the private dining room, feeling like the whole world was watching her. 20 pairs of eyes stared at her, waiting to see what she would do. Her heart was beating so fast she thought everyone could hear it. Marcus was still smiling his cruel smile, enjoying every second of Sarah's discomfort. He had done this kind of thing before to other service workers, but tonight felt special to him. There was something about Sarah's quiet dignity that made him want to break it down. "Come on, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice getting louder, so everyone in the room could hear. "Don't keep us waiting. The piano won't bite you." Some of his friends were starting to look uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen, an older woman with kind eyes, spoke up softly. "Marcus, maybe we should just enjoy our dinner. The girl is working." But Marcus waved his hand to silence her. "Nonsense. This is my party, and I want some entertainment. Besides, I'm sure our little waitress here would love a chance to show off her hidden talents." He said the word talents like it was a joke, making it clear he didn't think Sarah had any. His friends who knew him well recognized the look in his eyes. Marcus was like a cat playing with a mouse, and he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. Sarah looked toward Mr. Peterson again, hoping he would find some way to help her. But the manager just stood there wringing his hands, torn between protecting his employee and keeping his biggest customer happy. "Sarah," Mr. Peterson said in a weak voice, "maybe you could just sit at the piano for a moment. You don't have to actually play anything, just ... Just sit there for a minute, and then we can get back to serving dinner." But Marcus heard this and shook his head firmly. No. That's not good enough. I want to hear music. Real music. Even if it's terrible." He turned to his friends and laughed. "This should be fun to watch." Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't give Marcus the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had been through worse things than this. When her father was dying in the hospital, when she had to drop out of school, when she worked double shifts just to pay for his medicine, those were real problems. This was just one mean man trying to make himself feel important. "Please, sir," Sarah said one more time, her voice steady despite her fear. "I really don't know how to play piano. Maybe I could sing a song instead, or I could tell a joke." Marcus laughed even louder. "A joke? Oh, this is rich. The waitress wants to tell us a joke." He looked around at his friends. "I think the joke is going to be watching her try to play piano." One of the younger men at the table, someone Sarah had never seen before, finally spoke up. "Marcus, this is getting a bit much. Can't we just order dessert and call it a night?" Marcus turned on him with angry eyes. "David, you're new to this group, so let me explain something to you. When I'm paying for dinner, I decide what happens. And right now, I want to hear our little waitress play piano." The threat in his voice was clear. David was a young lawyer trying to get business from Marcus's company. If he made Marcus angry, he could lose important clients. So he looked down at his plate and stayed quiet, just like everyone else. Sarah realized that no one was going to help her. All these rich, powerful people were too scared of Marcus to stand up for one waitress. She was completely alone. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll try to play something. But I'm warning you, I don't know what I'm doing." Marcus clapped his hands together happily. "Excellent. Now we're getting somewhere. Don't worry about being bad. We're expecting it." Sarah walked slowly toward the beautiful black piano. Each step felt like she was walking to her own execution. The piano bench was made of polished wood that matched the instrument perfectly. As she sat down, She could smell the lemon oil they used to keep the piano looking shiny. The piano keys were white and black, just like every piano she had ever seen. But these keys looked perfect, not a scratch or stain on them. This piano was probably worth more than her father's entire medical treatment, and now she was supposed to bang on it. Like a child playing with toys. Marcus and his friends were all watching her, waiting for the show to begin. Some of them had their phones out, ready to record what they thought would be a funny video of a waitress making a fool of herself. "Any time now," Marcus called out. "We're all waiting." Sarah placed her hands on the keys, but she didn't press them down yet. She was thinking about her father, lying in his hospital bed. He had always told her that music was a gift, something that belonged to her, no matter what happened in life. "Music lives in your heart," he had said. "It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, young or old. When you play, you're sharing a piece of your soul with the world." But now Sarah was being forced to share her soul with people who just wanted to laugh at her. It felt wrong, like they were asking her to throw away something precious just for their entertainment. "I'm waiting," Marcus said, his voice getting impatient. "Play something simple. How about Mary Had a Little Lamb? Even you should be able to manage that." His friends laughed nervously. They could see that Marcus was getting meaner, and they didn't want to be on his bad side. But they also felt sorry for Sarah, who looked so small and scared sitting at the big piano. Sarah took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She thought about all the nights she had practiced on her little keyboard, dreaming of playing a real piano like this one. She thought about her music teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had believed in her talent. She thought about the songs that lived in her heart, waiting to be played. When she opened her eyes, something had changed. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Anger. She was angry at Marcus for being cruel. She was angry at his friends for not stopping him. She was angry at a world that made her choose between her dignity and her job. But most of all, she was angry at herself for being ashamed of her gift. Music was the most beautiful thing in her life, and she had been hiding it like it was something to be embarrassed about. Marcus was still talking, making jokes about what song she should try to play. His friends were still laughing and waiting for her to fail. None of them had any idea what was about to happen. Sarah placed her fingers on the keys one more time. But this time, she wasn't thinking about embarrassment or humiliation. She was thinking about music, real music, the kind that could make people stop breathing and start crying at the same time. If Marcus wanted a show, she would give him one. But it wouldn't be the show he was expecting. Sarah's fingers touched the piano keys, and for a moment, everything in the room seemed to stop. The beautiful black piano felt warm under her hands, like it had been waiting for her all this time. She could feel the perfect balance of the keys, the way they responded to even the lightest touch. Marcus was still smiling his mean smile, waiting for her to stumble through a children's song. His friends had their phones ready to record what they thought would be a funny video. Mr. Peterson stood in the corner, looking worried about what might happen to his restaurant's reputation. But Sarah wasn't thinking about any of them anymore. She was thinking about the music that had lived in her heart for so many years, the songs that had kept her company during the loneliest nights. This piano was the best instrument she had ever touched, and she was going to make it sing. Sarah began to play, and the first notes that came from the piano were nothing like what anyone expected. Instead of a simple children's song, she started playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, one of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. The music filled the room like magic. Every note was perfect, clear, and strong. Sarah's fingers moved across the keys with incredible skill, like they were dancing. The melody was sad and beautiful at the same time, telling a story without words. Marcus's smile disappeared from his face. His mouth fell open as he realized what was happening. This wasn't a waitress trying to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. This was a real musician playing music that most people could never even dream of playing. The laughter in the room died completely. One by one, Marcus's friends put down their phones and just listened. They had heard this piece before, in fancy concert halls, played by famous pianists who charged hundreds of dollars for tickets. But none of those performances had been more beautiful than what they were hearing now. Sarah's whole body moved with the music. Her hands flew across the keys, playing complicated passages that required years of training to master. But it wasn't just technical skill. There was something deeper in her playing. Every note came from her heart, carrying all the pain and hope and dreams she had kept hidden for so long. Mrs. Chun, the older woman who had tried to stop Marcus earlier, felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She had been to the best concert halls in the world, but she had never heard music played with such pure emotion. This young woman wasn't just playing notes. She was telling the story of her life. The music got louder and more dramatic. Sarah's fingers found every key they needed, creating melodies that seemed to float in the air. The piano responded to her touch like it was alive, giving voice to feelings that were too deep for words. Marcus stood frozen, watching his cruel joke turn into something completely different. He had wanted to embarrass Sarah, to make her look foolish in front of everyone. Instead, she was making him look like a fool. Every person in the room could see that she was incredibly talented, and that he had tried to humiliate someone far more gifted than he would ever be. The piece had quiet moments too, where Sarah played so softly that everyone held their breath to hear every note. During these gentle passages, her face showed the deep concentration of a true artist. She was completely absorbed in the music, lost in a world where only beauty mattered. David, the young lawyer who had tried to speak up earlier, whispered to the person next to him, "My God, she's incredible. Where did she learn to play like that?" But no one answered him. They were all too amazed to speak. They were witnessing something extraordinary, a moment when pure talent revealed itself in the most unexpected way. As the music continued, Sarah seemed to transform completely. The tired, nervous waitress was gone. In her place sat a confident artist who belonged at that piano. Her posture was straight and graceful. Her movements were fluid and natural. This was who she really was. Underneath the uniform and the polite smiles, some of the guests recognized how difficult the piece was. They had studied music themselves, or their children took piano lessons. They knew that what Sarah was playing took years of serious training to master. This wasn't something you could learn from a book or figure out on your own. The music built to a dramatic climax, with Sarah's hands flying across the entire keyboard. The sound filled every corner of the room, making the crystal glasses vibrate and the paintings on the walls seem to dance. It was the kind of music that made people forget where they were and lose themselves in pure beauty. Mr. Peterson, who had been worried about his restaurant, now felt proud. He had always known Sarah was special, but he had never imagined she had this kind of talent. He made a mental note to give her a raise, assuming she would still want to work at the restaurant after tonight. Marcus's face had gone from confident to confused to embarrassed. He could see his friends looking at him with new eyes, judging him for what he had tried to do. They had thought he was just having fun, but now they realized he had been truly cruel to someone who deserved their respect. The music reached its final section, where the melody became even more beautiful and sad. Sarah played with such feeling that several people in the room felt their hearts breaking. She was pouring years of struggle and sacrifice into every note, making everyone understand what it meant to give up your dreams for someone you loved. As the piece neared its end, Sarah's playing became softer and more gentle. The last notes seemed to hang in the air like delicate flowers, beautiful and fragile. She played the final chord with perfect timing, letting it fade away slowly until the room was completely silent. For a long moment, nobody moved. They were all still under the spell of the music, trying to process what they had just experienced. Sarah sat at the piano bench, her hands still on the keys, breathing deeply after the emotional performance. Then slowly, Mrs. Chun began to clap. The sound of her applause broke the spell, and suddenly the entire room erupted in applause. But this wasn't the polite clapping that rich people did at charity events. This was real applause, the kind that came from people who had just witnessed something truly amazing. Marcus stood there, not clapping, watching his carefully planned humiliation turn into Sarah's moment of triumph. He had thought he was so clever, so powerful. But Sarah had just shown everyone in the room that real power came from talent, hard work, and the courage to share your gifts with the world. The tables had turned completely, and Marcus was the one who looked foolish now. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Sarah slowly lifted her hands from the piano keys and turned to face the room. She couldn't believe what had just happened. For 2 years, she had walked past this piano every day, dreaming of playing it. Now she had just performed one of the most difficult pieces in classical music, and everyone was clapping for her. Mrs. Sheen was the first person to speak. She wiped tears from her eyes and walked toward Sarah with a big smile. "My dear, that was absolutely incredible. I have never heard Chopin played with such emotion and skill." Sarah stood up from the piano bench, her legs feeling a little shaky. "Thank you," she said quietly, still not quite believing this was really happening. "Where did you learn to play like that?" asked David, the young lawyer who had tried to defend her earlier. His voice was full of respect and amazement. Sarah looked around the room at all the faces staring at her. These were the same people who had been ready to laugh at her just 10 minutes ago. Now they were looking at her like she was the most important person in the room. "I studied music at the community college," Sarah explained, her voice getting stronger. "I had to stop when my father got sick. The medical bills were too expensive, so I started working here to pay for his treatment." The room got very quiet again. Everyone understood now why Sarah had been working as a waitress instead of pursuing her obvious talent. She hadn't given up her dreams because she wasn't good enough. She had given them up to save someone she loved. Marcus was still standing in the same spot, but now he looked completely different. His confident smile was gone, replaced by embarrassment and shame. He could see the way his friends were looking at him, some with disappointment, others with disgust. His cruel joke had revealed more about his character than about Sarah's single quotes. Mrs. Chun pulled out an expensive business card from her purse. "Sarah, I sit on the board of the City Symphony Orchestra. We've been looking for a pianist for our upcoming season. Would you be interested in auditioning?" Sarah's eyes went wide. The City Symphony Orchestra was famous throughout the region. Professional musicians competed for years just to get a chance to audition with them. I would love that," Sarah stammered, "but I don't know if I'm good enough. I haven't had a real piano to practice on in 2 years." "After what we just heard," Mrs. Chun said firmly, "I think you're more than good enough. Here's my card. Call me tomorrow and we'll set up an audition." Before Sarah could respond, another man stepped forward. He was in his 50s with kind eyes and gray hair. "I'm Professor Williams from the Downtown Music Academy. We need someone to teach our advanced piano students. The pay is much better than restaurant work, and the schedule would give you time to practice and perform." He handed Sarah his business card too. "I've been teaching music for 30 years, and I can recognize real talent when I hear it. You have something special." A woman in an elegant dress joined the conversation. "I'm Amanda Foster. I organize private concerts for wealthy families in the city. They pay very well for quality entertainment. I could book you for several events this month alone." Sarah looked down at the 3 business cards in her hands. An hour ago, she had been a waitress worried about paying her father's medical bills. Now she had 3 offers for music jobs that would pay more than she made in a year at the restaurant. Mr. Peterson, who had been watching everything from the corner, walked over with a huge smile on his face. Sarah, I had no idea you were so talented. I'm sorry I didn't help you when. He glanced nervously at Marcus. Well, I'm just sorry. It's okay, Mr. Peterson, Sarah said. You were just trying to keep everyone happy. But it wasn't really okay, and everyone in the room knew it. Mr. Peterson had been willing to let Sarah be humiliated just to keep one customer satisfied. It was a lesson he would never forget. Marcus finally found his voice, but it came out much quieter than usual. I owe you an apology, Sarah. I thought I was just having some fun, but I realize now that I was being cruel. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. She could see that he was genuinely sorry, but she also knew that his apology was coming too late. Everyone in the room had seen his true character. Apology accepted, Sarah said simply. But maybe next time you'll think twice before you try to embarrass someone just for your own entertainment. The other guests nodded in agreement. Several of them were already planning to tell their friends about what had happened tonight. Marcus's reputation as a cruel bully would spread quickly through the city's social circles. One of Marcus's business partners, a man named Robert, pulled him aside. That was completely unacceptable, Marcus. We can't be associated with that kind of behavior. It's bad for business. Marcus realized that his attempt to humiliate Sarah might end up costing him much more than just his reputation. Several potential business deals could fall through if word got out about his cruelty. Meanwhile, Sarah was surrounded by people wanting to talk to her about music opportunities. Mrs. Chen was already planning which pieces Sarah should prepare for her symphony audition. Professor Williams was explaining the teaching schedule at his music academy. Amanda Foster was talking about concert dates and payment rates. I can't believe this is really happening, Sarah said, looking at all the business cards and phone numbers people had given her. Believe it, said Mrs. Chun with a warm smile. Talent like yours doesn't stay hidden forever. Tonight was just the night it decided to shine. The party was winding down, but no one wanted to leave. They all wanted to talk to Sarah more, to hear about her musical background and her plans for the future. She had become the most popular person in the room. As people started to say goodbye, many of them made sure to shake Sarah's hand and tell her how much her performance had meant to them. Several promised to attend her first symphony concert. Marcus left early, slipping out without saying goodbye to most of his guests. His cruel plan had backfired completely, and he knew that tonight would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. Sarah finally had a moment to herself as the room emptied. She sat back down at the piano and played a few soft notes, just to make sure it had all been real. Mr. Peterson approached her one last time. Sarah, I understand if you want to quit and pursue these music opportunities. But if you ever want to come back, you'll always have a job here. Sarah smiled. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, but I think it's time for me to try something new. The next morning, Sarah called her father at the hospital to tell him everything that had happened. He cried with joy when he heard about the symphony audition and the teaching job. I always knew your music would take you places, he said. I'm so proud of you for never giving up. Within a week, Sarah had quit her job at the restaurant and started teaching at the music academy. Her students loved her because she understood what it meant to struggle for your dreams. The symphony audition went perfectly, and she was offered a position as their featured pianist. Marcus learned that actions have consequences. Several of his business partners ended their relationships with him after hearing about what had happened. His reputation in the city's social circles was damaged, and he found himself being invited to fewer parties and events. But the most important change was in Marcus himself. He realized that his money and power meant nothing if he used them to hurt people. He quietly began donating money to music programs for students who couldn't afford lessons, though he never told anyone about it. Sarah's story spread throughout the city's music community. She became an inspiration to other young artists who were working regular jobs to support their families. She proved that talent and determination could overcome any obstacle. And that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places. The piano at the Golden Crown restaurant was eventually donated to Sarah's Music Academy, where it helped other young musicians discover their own talents and chase their dreams. And every time someone played it, they remembered the night when a brave young waitress showed the world that real worth comes from what's in your heart, not what's in your wallet.